Shakur Stevenson's grandfather and trainer, Willy Moses, was just on the live recently where he got asked a few questions about Devin Haney, about Shakur, and about Ryan Garcia and Gervonta Davis. And he said some interesting things in that live.
And would happen probably before the Devin and Shakur fight. That's if he get through them because, hey, Ryan Garcia, when we fought Ryan, Ryan was we didn't even know who Ryan was. Not that he cared, but when we finished Ryan, I don't know how some Ryan mother got my phone number, but she got me and asked me would I help Ryan out. And I told Ryan about that bullshit ass jab that he had at the time that we was counting him over and under and everything else. And I taught him his jab. Okay, so that jab his dad talked about, that jab is all that shit he talked about. That jab came from me. Okay, all right. So don't let that fool you. All right.
So as you heard him say, he thinks that the Shakur and Tank fight would take place before Shakur and Devin fight. But he said Tank has to focus on getting through them guys first. And then he was like, hey, Ryan Garcia ain't no slouch. I taught him his jab. Which is interesting to me because if you've been listening to Ryan Garcia and his trainer Joe Goosen for the past few days since the press conferences and in all their interviews, that seems like what their game plan could be. Ryan keeps mentioning how Tank likes to give up the first few rounds to fill out his opponent, and then he gets aggressive. And they were saying how they're cool if Tank comes out and fights that way. So I guess their game plan is to sit back and jab and try to counter Tank when he gets too aggressive. I guess that's what the game plan is, which I don't know if that's a good game plan because if you look at the stats, statistically, guys are not very successful with their jab against Gervonta Davis. And that's not my opinion. That's not what I think I see in the ring. Those are statistics. Those are facts. Guys don't land their jabs at a very high percentage on Gervonta Davis. Now, he could look like he's winning rounds if he's busy with it, which is what happens with Tank a lot. People say he loses rounds, but it's not that. It's that he has a low punch output and that he usually gets outworked. It's never really a situation where Tank is getting outclassed or beat up and he's losing rounds. No, it's usually him having a low punch output and him being outworked. So I guess they're counting on that playing into their favor. And I guess what Wiley Moses was saying, watch out to Tank because I taught Ryan this jab. So it ain't going to be an easy fight. Then he got asked about Shakur and Tank sparring after Tank mentioning that he cracked Shakur in sparring. And this is what he had to say.
On some of my pages, you'll see some pictures of Tank and Shakur when they were young, okay? Shakur's been sparring Tank ever since he was young. Tank was bigger, older than him. Shakur been getting with him ever since then. And Shakur was nowhere near the fighter he was boxing Tank when he was little. So when he got older, now Shakur is an amateur world champion. Of course it's going to be different. It would be ludicrous for anybody think it would be any different.
So he was saying Shakur and Tank been sparring since they were young. And Tank is 3 years older than Shakur, and Shakur has always been able to get with him. And then when Shakur became an amateur world champion, he started getting the best of Tank, which is something I've heard Wiley Moses say before, that he gives the edge to guys with amateur world experience, with world amateur experience, over the guys with just national experience like Tank. He gives the guys with the world experience, the international level, more of the edge. And he reiterated that more in this live as well.
About him and Ryan, but the true story is, look, when you look at advancement and the success in amateur boxing, you got to be in it to win it, right? So the guys that were in it, they won. The guys weren't in those, they lost. Okay, so amateurs, Tank, Ryan, and all those guys, they weren't only beaten by Shakur and Devin and them, they were being beaten by a lot of other people. You understand? But we had one kid, believe it or not, I didn't think it was going to happen. But Julian Rodriguez, we brought him and Tank up here one time to fight in Nutley, and Julian beat Tank. And, I know at the professional level, Julian Rodriguez can't beat Tank. So, the amateur stuff don't really mean a lot of things, but it does if you can take the easy way out and keep the media and build this here name out and reputation about yourself and go the easy way, go to Mexico, go somewhere and build a record up rather than starting taking a fast track, go over here, fighting people that's in the rankings so you can get ranked earlier, so you can move up earlier, so you can get to a championship earlier, okay? Fighting Not 6 rounds, like 6 rounds. Okay, I did 2 6. I'm going to 8. Okay, I did 2 8. I'm going to 10. Hey, now I'm fighting top guys. Now you want to fight for some mandatory guy for a title. That's working, you know. So when guys don't take those routes and they build it up, you can get all the hype and whatnot.
Now, first, don't get me wrong. I am not refuting his theory and what he thinks works. You know, Wiley Moses is one of the best amateur coaches in the country. He's won every award you can win as an amateur coach. He coached the national teams. He's a hell of a coach. I'm just a fan with a microphone and an opinion. But I gotta push back against his theory a little bit. I got to. Which was kind of hard because when I went and looked at all the greats that we know of, they all have that international boxing experience on the amateur level. They all have it. The only one that didn't have it that I could find, maybe y'all could leave some names in the comments, but the only ones I could find as far as all-time greats that didn't have that international experience was Bernard Hopkins. We all know Bernard Hopkins started boxing in jail, so he didn't get to have that amateur background. And he came home, he turned pro. And as far as guys now that's fighting and considered good fighters, Regis Prograis ain't really fight on the international level, and neither did Keith Thurman. But other than that, all these guys, all these top guys that we know of, they fought on that international level. Gervonta Davis hasn't. And also Teofimo Lopez, who didn't have much experience on the international level, he represented Honduras in the Olympics, and he lost his first fight. And I believe that's his only international experience. And here's where I'll start to push back. Because then, as a pro, we saw Teofimo go in there and beat the guy that's considered the greatest amateur boxer of all time as a pro, in Lomachenko. That's why I think Wiley Moses' theory is somewhat correct, somewhat not correct. Because we seen Teofimo Lopez, with one international fight, go in there and beat a two-time Olympic gold medalist who only lost a couple times in the amateurs and 400-plus fights, and is considered the greatest of all time. None of that mattered in the pros when they fought. But, as you heard him say, Tank was never good enough in the amateurs to make it to that international level. He always lost before he got to that level. And he said how he brought Tank up to New Jersey to fight a kid from New Jersey that he didn't think would beat Tank, and that kid beat Tank. And this part right here is where I gotta cook Wiley Moses. I'm sorry. I got all this respect in the world for him, but I gotta cook him. Not in a disrespectful way, but I gotta cook him. We heard him say, and it could be true. It could be true. Only time will tell. But we heard him say, when guys don't take that route of that world level when they're amateurs, and they turn pro, and they go fight a whole bunch of nobodies in Mexico, and then they're slowly developed over time to the first world championship, and the media hypes them up, that those type of guys aren't on the same level as the guys who fought on the world level in the amateurs, and then fast-tracked their careers as pros. And two names he mentioned was Devin Haney and Shakur. So, let's look at the facts. Out of Tank, Shakur, and Devin, Tank was the youngest when he won his first world championship. Now, Shakur did it in less fights. Shakur did it in the least amount of fights. Shakur did it when he was 12-0. Tank did it when he was 16-0. But Tank was the youngest when he became a world champion out of the three that Wiley Moses mentioned. And they were both the same age. They were both 22. But Tank had just turned 22 a month and a half before, and Shakur was closer to turning 23 when he won his. So when Wiley Moses was saying how the guys who don't take that world level in the amateur level, so they don't go into them world-class fights as soon as in their pro career, that was just factually wrong. Because we seen Tank become a world champion before both of the guys that he mentioned. Because we all know Devin Haney in his first 20 fights, he was the one down in Mexico beating up cab drivers. That wasn't Gervonta Davis. And Devin Haney had that international experience. And he became a world champion latest at 23 years old. And he was saying how those type of fights that those guys have before they get to that world championship level as a pro is what creates the media to hype them up and build this image around them when it's not really what they are. Well, just tell me this. Who on Shakur Stevenson's record would Gervonta Davis not look like the Gervonta Davis that we've been seeing? Point them out to me. Point them out to me. Who we going to say? Joet Gonzalez? Because he beat Tank in the amateurs? Would Joet be able to handle that power in the pros? Will we really pick Joet Gonzalez to beat Gervonta Davis in the professionals? Who else? Jamel Herring? 35-year-old Jamel Herring? I don't even want to think what Tank would do to Jamel if Shakur stopped Jamel. No disrespect to Jamel. He was a good fighter. But come on, man. Let's just be real. Oscar Valdez, Tank would stop Oscar Valdez. Like, who on Shakur's record would Tank not look like Gervonta Davis that we've been seeing? Like, I'm surprised to hear this narrative being pushed by Willy Moses. And maybe just because I'm a fan, I can't see it. These guys is in the business. They know what they talking about. They've been around. So maybe they know Tank really ain't that good. It's just the fights he been getting make him look that way. But when I look at these guys' records, I don't see anybody on their records that will make him look any different. Like, we keep saying that Tank gets these opponents to make him look good. He's not really fighting anybody good. But then when one of these other top guys get the same opponent, they can't perform at the same level that Tank did. We saw what Gervonta Davis did to Gamboa. Then we saw what Devin Haney did to Gamboa. We saw what Gervonta Davis did to Pedraza. Then we saw what Lomachenko did to Pedraza. We saw what Gervonta Davis did to Mario Barrios. Then we saw what Keith Thurman did to Mario Barrios. Like, why is it if he's not that good of a fighter and he's just being built that way and pushed by the media that way, that he's putting on better performances against these opponents than these guys that are perceived to be so great? I don't understand it. And I'm built off common sense. I just go off common sense. It doesn't make sense that y'all can tell me that this guy ain't that good and he's just being built this way, but then he's performing better against the same opponent than the guys that y'all praise. That doesn't make sense to me. But maybe they're right. Maybe it's not supposed to make sense to me. Maybe this is what makes promoters so smart, that they can trick us to believing that we're seeing something that we're not. Maybe that's it. Like I said, I'm just a fan with an opinion and a microphone. These guys been around this their whole lives and been around each other their whole lives. You know, boxing, the high level of boxing is just like the NBA. In the NBA, all those guys in the NBA been around each other since they were very young kids at the same AAU tournaments, the best AAU tournaments in the country, the best camps in the country, the All-American games. The NBA, they all know each other. They all came up together. And boxing is the same thing. All these guys came up going to the same amateur tournaments and the same gym sparring to get that elite level of sparring. Boxing and the NBA is basically the same thing. So maybe they know something that we don't, and Tank really ain't that good. But that's what I got for y'all. I'm out.